In any given situation, do you also feel that it's much easier and better to change our own reaction rather than waiting for the situation to change or for the other person to change? Well, if that is the case, I completely agree with you. Yes, that is a much better and easier solution. But what happens when we are in that situation? What exactly happens? How many times are we able to change our reaction in a given situation? Don't we feel going back to the same old reaction? What draws us back? Well, I'm Dr. Neeru, a doctor in Ayurveda, which is an Indian system of medicine and healing, and I have been a wellness coach for more than a decade now. This channel is my initiative to share knowledge about physical health, knowledge about mind, and knowledge about our emotions so that we can together make this a holistic well-being journey. And as a result, you can take charge of your own self and your own life. So let's get started with today's topic, our reactions. How to change our reaction in a given situation. Well, what is a reaction? We all know it's very simple. It's a response to an action. It's our reply to an action. So what is an action? So we can understand an action as any situation or anything that we experience through any of our five senses. I have talked about in very detail in one of my videos wherein I have explained the interaction between the five senses and the mind. Those of you who have seen it would understand, but those of you who haven't, I'm going to cover that a bit here as well. But I would still recommend if you can go through that video. I will be sharing the link in the description box for you to easily access it. So before we move on, let's clear out some myths. So there is a very common myth that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. While the truth is there are varied reactions to the similar action. I'm sure you would have seen people reacting in different ways in the given situation. It could be between different people. For example, I might react to a situation in a very aggressive way while you may react in the similar situation in a very calm way. Or sometimes I myself react in the given situation in an aggressive way and sometimes in a very different way. So there is no such there's no truth behind this fact that at least it does not apply to our life, that for every action there has to be an equal and opposite reaction. So let's clear this myth out of our mind before we start working on our reactions. The next myth is that reaction is automated and dependent on action. While this myth is partially true that the reaction is automated, but it is at the same time it is also a conscious choice and it can be independent of action. So yes, we can choose our reactions if we are conscious, and we can make it independent of action. So we'll see further how. So let's quickly once again look at the quick review of the understanding of the mind, which I had detailed out in one of my other videos. So here we understand it with a very basic computer functioning, wherein we have an input, a central processing unit, and an output. The input is any external event which is received as signals via one or more of our sense organs. So now we could sort of hear something or see something or smell something or taste something or feel through our skin something. So all these become stimulus and they are like an input signals to create an output. Then we have in the middle as the central processing unit, which is the mind. Now all these information, these input signals goes to the mind for processing. Mind processes these inputs basis beliefs, values, assumptions, traumas and experiences to create a perception of that external situation. So all these beliefs, values, assumptions we have been carrying over years of our life in form of files that are stored in our mind. So every time an external event happens, our mind refers to these files and comes up with a perception of that external event. So in a way, these beliefs, values, assumptions, etc., like the glasses, the spectacles that our mind wear to see the input in light of, and as a result an output is generated, which is either an emotional response or a physical response, or both. And that is what we call reaction. That is what we are trying to work on. So this working is very important to understand how a reaction is generated. It is generated as a result of the perception that is being built by the mind when it wears any of the spectacle of a belief or a value or assumption that we have been carrying as files in our mind. And this is sort of a response of the mind against the external event that is like a live event in front of us. So to better understand this functioning of the mind, let me explain it with an example. So for example, I have a belief that a particular religious community is not good. The people of this religious community are very violent or bad. So that's what has been my belief. Now, this belief could have been based on what I have heard from my parents, what I have read. So it could be anything that how I have fed my senses in the past, which has led to this belief. Now, this belief gets registered as a file in my mind. So there is a file called belief about this ex-religious community. Now, whenever any situation happens wherein maybe somebody is talking about this religious community, so I hear from my sense of sense of hearing, I hear very good about this religious community. So which is against my belief, which says that this religious community is bad. So that creates a clash in my mind. And that generates an emotional or a physical response. Now it could be in anger, it could be a violent physical response, it could be anything. In the given example, the input was what I heard from my ears. So the sense organ was ear, and the stimulus or the input was the statement, the statement talking good about this community. Now how my mind worked, how my processing unit worked in this situation, it went back, wore a spectacle of that belief which I had stored as a file. So my mind quickly goes into that file storage space, picks out that file, wear that glass, looks at the situation with that glass. Oh, this is not kind of matching. And an emotional response should be that of clash, that of rejecting this situation. Now we have our own mechanism of rejection, expressing denial or rejection. We can do it through anger, we can do it through irritation, we can just leave that space whatsoever. So this is a simple example how a emotional or a physical response is generated against an external stimulus. Now if we look at it very carefully, what do you think? What is the point that is under your control? So that is very important to analyze here. So there is an input, there is a processing unit, and there is an output, right? So what do you think? Well, yes, you are right. The input, which is an external situation, which is something happening outside, is something which is not in our control. People would be talking something, we would be hearing something, there would be something happening in front of our eyes, there would be something we would be smelling, there would be a taste. Now, how our mind is processing it is the next step. That is what is in our control. So how are we processing that stimulus, that external information? Which spectacle, which glass are we wearing? On that depends our physical or emotional response. So now if you've gone in the museum, you have those convex and concave mirror wherein when you stand in front of that, in one mirror, in front of one mirror, you seem very thin and tall, and in front of other mirror, you seem very short and sort of very heavy. But you are same. So similarly, the input or the external situation is same. So it's the processing unit or the mirror or the glass through which you are looking at that situation, which is something that changes your output. That changes whether you look tall or thin, or whether you look stout and fat. So that is our point of, that is a starting point of our working. So while we have understood until here that we have understood about the myths, the two myths that are about this action and reaction theory. The second is we have understood about how our mind functions and creates a response or a reaction that we have to work on. And number three, it's very important here to reaffirm within ourselves that we want to get rid of this reaction. Now, this is a very, very important step. If you are tired of your reaction, you don't want it, but at the same time, that desire, that need is not still 100%. You're still enjoying that reaction. So we'll understand more with an example, but if there is a reaction that you are trying to work on, that you are trying to sort of avoid in your own self, that you don't want yourself expressing in any given situation, then you have to be 100% sure that you don't want it. You have to confirm in your mind that this is something that I don't want at all. What would be the next reaction? Let's not worry about it. But this is something that I don't want. This is not the way that I want to react in this given situation. We have to get 100%, 200% sure about it. Then only we'll be able to move forward. So once you have affirmed that you're very sure you don't want this reaction coming out of yourselves, so we'll move on how to work on this. So for that, we'll have to take an example. So in this case, let's take an example of how we react usually when our mistake is pointed. Yeah, it's a very common example. All of us sort of face this situation. So how we usually react when somebody points out our mistake. It could be our mother or a father. It could be husband or wife pointing out each other's mistakes. It could be the employer, the boss, or a colleague pointing out your mistake. So irrespective of the person, or you can choose your person right now if it is something that you want to work on. And how do you react in this particular situation? So they are pointing out your mistake. You may act in anger, you may act in irritation, or you may act in denial. So if I generalize all these actions, the reactions, if I generalize all these reactions, anger or irritation or denial, these are all defensive reactions. So in a way, we are trying to defend the situation, that this is not my mistake. So we can react in any way. We can just start pointing out their mistakes. So it usually happens in husband and wife. So if the husband is pointing out wife's mistake, you also do this, you also do that. So you start sort of pointing out the other person's mistake. So your reaction could be anything. Here I'll have to stick to a general reaction. You can keep working on your particular specific reaction. So here in this example, if I take when somebody points out our mistake, and we react in a defensive way. Now, if we have to understand it, what we have understood until now is the only thing that we can work on is how are we processing the stimulus? How are we processing the action which is coming through our senses? So whenever we are under this kind of a situation, of course there is an external stimulus which comes through any of our sense organs. There must be a scene wherein somebody is pointing out our mistakes, so something goes in through our ears, we are viewing through our eyes, and then that information is going to the mind. The mind is, now here we have to analyze what is our mind referring to generate this particular response of defense. So, and it could be different in all of us. So if we carefully look at it, what is the file that our mind refers to? Is it that of a belief that I feel that it's my belief that If somebody is pointing out my mistake, I will be considered inferior to that person, so that could be a belief. So my mind would be referring to that belief and generating an emotion of defense. My mind could be referring to an assumption that this employer or this colleague is trying to point out my mistake because he wants to put me down. So that could be an assumption. And this assumption could be basis anything what I've heard about that colleague or employer in the past. So, so quickly as soon as that colleague or employer finds out my mistake, my mind refers to that assumption that he or she is trying to put me down. So basis that assumption, I get an emotional response. Or it could be my mind might be or your mind could be referring to a file of trauma, wherein in the childhood you have gone through a trauma wherein your father used to point out a lot of your mistakes and used to make you feel inferior in front of your siblings, in front of your friends, in front of other family members. So this is something as a past trauma that your mind has registered at, and it is related to pain. It is related to something which is not pleasant, and your mind wants to avoid it. And a lot of from that trauma also, a lot of anger and resentment and frustration has been attached to this file. So the moment this file is referred, the corresponding emotion is sort of automatically generated. So this is the step of finding your spectacle, finding that file which your mind is referring to. Unless we do not explore this file for ourselves, working in this given situation, we won't be able to change our response. So once we have figured out this file, we are sure this is the file that our mind keep referring to in order to generate this response in this given situation. Then the next step is, so what do we do when we find a file which we don't want? So yes, that's why I said we have to be very sure that we don't want it. So if you're sure that you don't want it, so let's delete it. So we must delete that file from our file storage space. Anyways, it's just taking a lot of space. It's such a heavy file. A lot of emotions are attached to it. It's so heavy. It's taking so much space in our whole system. So and it's doing no good. So it's very important to understand that this file is doing no good to you. If your father has done something like 20 years or 30 years ago, 40 years ago, this is like useless data that we are storing in ourselves. It is of no use. It was something that he has expressed out of his own psychological errors. So why are you carrying that garbage along with your life, the whole life, and you are sort of recreating that situation in your life again and again, because you are wearing that spectacle and you are viewing the world with that spectacle, and you are analyzing every situation based on that spectacle. That's how you are recreating those situations in your life. There are multiple, that file is getting more strength every time you refer to it. So this is very important to understand. The more we refer to that file, the more stronger that file gets. It start taking more space in our system, and it is more likely that we'll refer to that file again and again. So it's very imperative here, very important here to delete that file. So are you with me here on this understanding that we'll have to delete this file once we have figured out which file our mind is referring to create this particular reaction that we want to change. So now how do we sort of delete that file? So first step is understanding, which is very crucial. Once we do not understand that this file is of no use, of no importance to my system, this is not going to get deleted. The more understanding we start getting about this fact, the weaker that file starts becoming. Secondly, we have to just affirm with this thought that I am not going to refer to this file. Whenever I'm in this situation, I'm not focusing on my reaction now. I'm focusing on that I don't have to refer to this file. I'm not going to refer to this file. And then from there, this new thread of, then your mind gets a shock because it is caught. earlier your mind was working in an automated fashion. You give an input command and an output is generated, so it has to do no work. Now you have given it a shock. I don't want this file to be referred, now do something else. So then from there the new things start unfolding. So now what has happened here is our consciousness has intervened. Our consciousness is now looking at the working of the mind. So mind is not working in an automated way now. That's why I told you that reactions are not automated. We can definitely control them by bringing our consciousness into it. By in bringing the intervention of our consciousness, we can easily change our reaction. So uh, uh, you have to just bring the intervention of your consciousness into it and give that shock to the mind, and then the things will start unfolding for you. So it's not something, it's not like scripted or written anywhere that this is what is going to happen. Now you have to find out for yourself. The moment you start doing it, um, things start unfolding for you. Things you start seeing changes. So this is a very strong step which you take by analyzing your file, your belief, or your assumption, or your past trauma or experience, and by understanding its futility, by understanding its unworthiness, or by understanding how what a waste it is to keep this file in your system, you have won half the battle. And then as strong as you become in your decision and in your understanding of this file, the better control you start taking on your own reaction. So yes, that's how this is a sort of a beginning of your self-work journey. And please analyze for yourself how you can apply this knowledge to your life situations in life, and let me know if this changes something. Please do not expect miraculous results. It's not a magic wand. It's something that we keep working and we'll fail multiple times. So don't worry about that. Keep working, and let me know in comment section if you come across any concern, any problems, you're stuck. I would be really sort of happy to help you out in solving out the problems of your life. So thank you so much for staying tuned. I hope this brings some clarity to how your mind functions and how a reaction is generated before you actually start working on changing a reaction, because it's very important that instead of trying to repair something or trying to change something, it's better to understand where it is coming from. The journey becomes much more easier. So all the best, and I'll be coming up with more such information that will help your journey of self-exploration. So till then, keep taking care of yourself and keep working on yourself. Great. Thank you so much.